We're the Vinyl Verdict, and today we're talking about Maybe Tomorrow by the Iveys, soon to be Badfinger. And this is an interesting one because it overlaps quite a bit with Magic Christian music, at least some of the songs, but we're going to pretend like we don't know any of that, and we're going to go into it as if we heard it when it came out in 1969. So Maybe Tomorrow was recorded between July 68 and March 69. It was released July 4th, 69 in Germany, Italy, and Japan, but not in the UK, US. It was planned for that summer to be released in the US and the UK, and there was actually different album art even printed, which is what I think the inside of this is, right? But it was pulled. We think Alan Klein obviously had some role in that. That's been a little more documented now. And this is a weird one because unlike a lot of the other albums that were part of their breakthrough and part of their live set and everything, nothing was ever played live from this album other than Maybe Tomorrow and Daddy's a Millionaire, which was the single released before. So this album, even though they were touring nonstop around this time, like it wasn't really representing the live act. It was kind of like a studio work with, you know, the Tony Visconti production. Mal Evans was involved, all of that. Not kind of the live act that they would become. There's 12 tracks total. They total about 45 minutes. And in terms of the breakdown, notably only one co-written song on the whole album, which is Yesterday Ain't Coming Back, which was Pete Ham and Tom Evans. Beyond that, there's 5 Pete Ham songs, 4 Tom Evans songs, 1 Ron Griffith song, and 1 Mike Gibbons song. And actually, I'm kind of surprised that there's only 1 Ron Griffith song, because he wrote a lot in the band. There's a lot of demos that he wrote, but there's only 1 song that he wrote that's on this album. And obviously, you know, we're not going to get into the retrospective too much, but I think it's interesting how divided some of the community is. Some people are obviously, you know, this is kind of the peak to them of the musical output of the band. We don't subscribe to that, but we love the music that they were doing at this point. But, you know, there's members of the band. I think Mike Gibbons, towards the end of his life, you know, said this was amazing work, and he was really happy with the direction that they started in. Versus, you know, I was listening to the Apple Days interview recently, and Tom Evans seemed very embarrassed by a lot of this music at the end of his life, especially I'm in Love, which, you know, he regretted some of the sound effects and called the music overall just very naff, saying that, you know, it's not very becoming, I guess, of the songwriter he wanted to be. You never heard this, I guess, until the 90s.
Never did. Saw an ad once, we were thinking of, and didn't order it, but some vague thing in Rolling Stone about an album called Maybe Tomorrow, before Badfinger was Badfinger, and
this is obviously, you know, kind of that missing link for a lot of American audiences, I think, in UK once it was released. Okay, so we'll get into it track by track maybe, and then we'll come up with our overall thoughts here. So first song kicks off, Seesaw Granpa, Pete Ham. Totally different than Badfinger to me. I mean, this is like a very 60s guitar tone, kind of a piano boogie. It's actually Nicky Hopkins playing the piano on it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's got that, and it's very looped, the come on, yeah stuff. Heavy, but maybe a little bit slowed down. It's a little bit longer than I remember. It's actually almost 4 minutes long, and Pete's vocal delivery doesn't sound as confident to me as some of the other tracks later on. It feels like he's going for this rock song, but he's not fully committing to that rock voice that he has on like later tracks in the group.
Yeah, it's an Iveys type. It's not Badfinger, and that's, you know, it's got a nice little bounce to it, and hand claps even, I believe, towards the end. It's just everything's right there, but I think you said it that it just doesn't have the what they were going to have. The next song after that raucous rock opener is Beautiful and Blue. The young Tommy on the Iveys, and this is a great example of Tommy's early melodic, maybe kind of sad, but just kind of alone in the world, watching the couples go by and the world go by. But his voice had such a endearing tone to it and range, maybe not quite as developed, but I always thought of it as a sister song to Maybe Tomorrow with similar, you know, chord structure, and his voice double track with nice guitar flourishes. Kind of sounding like a harpsichord a little bit in it, but I'm not sure if that's a guitar after all. I don't think it's.
Yeah, I think it is much clearer here than on Magic Christian. It's definitely a different mix. Here I can clearly tell it's a volume pedal on a guitar, and the strings are much quieter. So you can kind of see, you can hear which is which.
Yeah, you're right. There was a difference.
In the context of the album also, Beautiful and Blue fits much more in with the production of Maybe Tomorrow. The orchestration is very 60s, the singing style, the lyrical content. I think it belongs here instead of Magic Christian music, at least in my mind.
Yeah, and also because of, sometimes the songs are sounding almost like a crossover song. Sometimes though when the Iveys come in with, for instance in Beautiful and Blue with the la 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 la, That's Iveys.
Yeah.
And I don't mind it. As a matter of fact, I find it endearing in its own way, but that's Iveys, not Badfinger.
All right, track 3, Dear Angie. Talked about it 3 times now, so I don't think we have much to add, but I think it's interesting they're doing their sequencing like they would do later where they're rotating through different singers,
This
right?
letter just keeps going and going.
Yeah. Again, we had Pete open up the album, Tom Evans takes a crack with Beautiful and Blue, Dear Angie, Ron comes in with his love letter song, and then Mike Gibbons 4. So by the 4th song, you've heard all 4 members singing, which is kind of cool. So 4th track is Think About the Good Times. Pete's breaking in the wah-wah pedal. He's just kind of going nuts, the whole song playing around with it. And they even have like a bubble noise, halfway through and stuff. But yeah, I think it's a good effort. I mean, this is the last song Mike Gibbons would sing on a record until Cowboy, I think. Yeah. But it never breaks out. The guitar never really... It's not that clear. He's kind of just playing around with
what
the chords.
breaks out a little bit is almost his drumming when he goes into that kind of Bo Diddley drum change in the song. It changes from bump 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 bump, and I thought that was kind of fun.
And then you really get to see the more eccentric side of them with the 5th track, Yesterday Ain't Coming Back.
Yeah.
I mean, these are definitely the 2 kitschest songs next to each other. Like, Think About Good Times and Yesterday Ain't
Coming Back. The horns are really kind of corny. I don't know if that's horns. Is that what it is?
Kazoos or something, I think. Kind of sounding like horns.
Yeah, and I don't know why, because that's the kind of thing Paul told him not to put on Come and Get It, I think.
And then they have vocal bass in there, which does sound, I mean, that is something McCartney was doing around this time, but they're kind of hitting the bass notes with, their voice. Yeah. I mean, I can really hear the Pete, I mean, I don't think we have a home demo for this, but I can hear like a Pete Ham home demo in this recording that feels like he's still singing it in that voice and everything. Obviously, it's a mix, it's a Ham Evans song.
That's true, yeah.
To me, it sounds very much like Pete wrote the verses and Tom wrote the chorus, and they kind of stuck it together.
It's a sentiment that, just the title has like a street sentiment that puts them... It's one of these love songs, but they just put it in the Iveys language, like Yesterday Ain't Coming Back. I just thought it was always like, yeah, that's true. Therein lies the song, and vocal harmony was nice in it a little bit. There was I thought it was okay.
Well, and I think it segues nicely into, because it is a bit of a parody, like in how melodramatic, some of the singing and everything is. And then it segues with the kind of the tide rolling through into Fisherman, which is even more of a parody kind of eccentric song. But they actually, I didn't realize it is kind of a medley. Like it's a clean transition.
I didn't realize that. I guess because one thing just going into Fisherman is, as a guy who heard it on Magic Christian often through the years, of course, a lot more special effects, everything. You're waking up in the morning, you hear the tide, you hear... And then it gets to the steps which you were familiar with from, so that was something different.
This is really the first isolated solo performance of someone on the album. And then we flip it over, side 2 kicks off with the namesake song, Maybe Tomorrow. Amazing, great song.
It's a great effort when you think of that this was what they were promoting. I think, is it Ken Mansfield, the Capitol exec, or somebody who said in his story that the picture that you showed, that there was a major promotion plan for the release of Maybe Tomorrow and the Iveys in the U.S. and why that didn't happen and what happened, I don't recall.
But great song.
Right.
Clearly the single. Track 8 is Sali Bloo, written by Pete but sung by Ron. There's some weirdness here. I don't know why. I'll just address it because everyone talks about it. There's a wah-wah pedal intro here that was cut on the CD remaster. It's been restored on the Magic Christian version. Not sure what the story is there, if anyone knows. I don't know that it adds that much to the song, but it is a weird decision. Even though Ron is singing it, you can hear the Pete Ham melody in there for sure, and some of the sustain, I think, in the notes and everything. The bass is doing some cool runs here that caught my ear. And the guitar work, it doesn't stand out as much, I think, as later Pete Ham stuff. I noticed with this song and others that it never really breaks free from sort of the arrangement. Like it's just in there, it's kind of delivering it to you in this chord format. I don't think he lets loose really until maybe one track towards the end.
Yeah, there's flashes of it. The real magic was to come. The real magic was to come, in the future. Not so much in the future. Maybe the riffs are there, and they work in the song structure.
Track 9 is Angelique.
I think it's beautiful, Tommy again, beautiful voice and harmony. It's not what When I Say was going to be. It's not that finely honed, but it's the same guy.
Half of the album is like these dream lover songs, and then the other half is psychedelic rockers. It seems like a pretty even split, and so we're kind of shifting gears back and forth. So this one maybe balances a little bit because there's that country thing in the middle, but the production is, there's all this kind of royal stuff going on in it that's taken out of Magic Christian, and the country guitar when that break happens, that guitar cuts out. It's so harsh in the mix. That was like this whole album needs it, but this song specifically really needs a remix. I would love to hear them fix that edit. But yeah, it's a nice, again, Tom definitely between this, Maybe Tomorrow, and Beautiful and Blue, he has a very iconic style of songwriting at this time, and I think they kind of figured out the production and they were pushing that to the forefront on the album. Track 10 is I'm in Love, so written by Pete but sung by Tom. Second Pete Ham song not sung by himself on the album. The way the guitar is mixed in here, it sounds really nice. It's got this jangly thing, and I think it's just isolated.
Yeah.
It's also the first example I think we have on here of a double guitar solo kind of happening.
Yeah, that's right. It's also an example of the weird accent that I believe Ron is doing, attempting a German accent in there, you know.
Well, they really go crazy at the end of it, too. I didn't remember. Did you hear all the stuff at the end? Like the pow wow, and like as it's fading out, they're really going nuts. I didn't remember that on here.
Yeah.
And hiccups and stuff they're doing after it ends.
I have to listen to it again.
But it's an amazing Tom Evans vocal performance. Beyond the sound effects, also, the Maybe Tomorrow version, the vocals are mixed so separate, I think, from the music. It really stands out in a way that is a little jarring. So I think the Magic Christian mix is just more composite. And then we get to track 11, which was also on Magic Christian Music, Knocking Down Our Home. And yeah, these were both written by the same guy, I'm in Love and Knocking Down Our Home. And I think we came to a similar conclusion when we talked about it then, but I'll stand by it. I think this is the peak of the Iveys era. This and Maybe Tomorrow is kind of the vanguard of just what production and their songwriting style and everything, what they could produce. It's got, you know, the haunting melody, lyrical storytelling, and just some upbeat bass and drums that makes it a little bit catchy. And I think, you know, this hit that intersection the same way Maybe Tomorrow did.
And very touching humanity lyrics about a couple having to move up his parents to the 7th floor where dad can't do the vegetable garden anymore because he'll be living on the 7th floor, which is almost a little dark comedy in there too. They're Knocking Down Our Home had that real McCartney-ish, 20-ish, honey pie-ish almost slant to it that only the Beatles had really touched with success, although there were groups trying to cash in on that Winchester Cathedral and all these weird songs. But you know, you wouldn't believe the rock that guy had in him when he wrote a song like that, but he had a lot in him.
The piano part here is Bill Collins playing it, actually.
Oh, really?
And so that's why the style of it is a little bit, it sounds a little old honky-tonk kind of. We get to the final track, track 12, and Pete delivers a pretty strong template for how to end an album. This is the third song in a row that he wrote. I don't think it's quite there at his full potential, like he would close out other albums in Badfinger, but clearly trying to deliver like an encore song here. It's 6 minutes long. It's I've Been Waiting. You know, it's sort of the same structure to the song of the way he would do Timeless Live, where he opens with the riff and gets this big crescendo and then it kind of fades into this little riff and it builds back up. And so I thought that was interesting that he had that vision all the way back to 69. And I think it's also the first song where Pete Ham pushes his range a little bit more. He sounds like he's straining to hit some of these notes and copying maybe some of the sounds of the 60s acts they were around at this time. I think a lot of it's a little bit too much in that style. I think later on he'd feel comfortable playing in his own style, which was maybe like a little more country-ish, a little more clean. This feels like he's going for a little bit more of the Hendrix, Cream style, a lot more kind of tremolo, whammy, going a little psychedelic in the solo and stuff like that. But even there, he's introducing some interesting stuff. So he has like the double guitar solo, right, where he has...
That's what I was going to say, even though you can connect him to those styles and influences of the day, Pete Ham was an original, and so he absorbs those styles and gives you back the riffs such as it's running through I've Been Waiting here, which it's pretty atmospheric when Mike gets going on the drums and the lead. I mean, for the Iveys, I would say this was a heavy song for the Iveys. That's what I would say.
I mean, the guitar parts here also, he's not doing like straight double guitar solos. This is before Joey's in the band even. He's already doing counter melody. So that when the second guitar comes in. And then they break into that offbeat thing, right, towards the end of the song. And I love the howling vocals in there. That's pretty cool. I don't know if that seems like a Tom Evans thing to add. Maybe it was Pete's idea.
Well, more than adequate for the times, and have some real skill in that late 60s, which was changing fast, which was the blues boom and all that, but also was still the end of the 60s that it had these melodic British groups like this, and whether it be the Hollies or other groups. And they were doing well to sign with Apple, and yet it all went by the wayside. I saw them just several years later, and they didn't even want to hear about this. At least that's the appearance. I mean, this was not Badfinger. They were just light years away from...
That's because it wasn't successful. I mean, again, if this was the number one charting album in the UK, I don't think they would have disowned it. Failure is an orphan, right? My only critique of this song specifically, though, I think, is I think he's playing more for feel than intention. Later on, he tells such a story in his guitar playing. It has such a narrative and melody, and here it's much more for feel, which is that, again, of its time, that's what was happening, and that's
fair. I think that's fair.
And then there's this demo also that came out recently, I'll just briefly say, where he's playing the riff on bass and everything, so it seems like he wrote that. And the solo is bizarre on that demo. It's like a wall of sound thing. Anyway, so that's the closing of the album, and so it ends heavy compared to, it's bookended with these Pete Ham rock songs, but it ends pretty heavy.
We've tried close to the impossible, which is to look at a group that we are in love with and look back at their earlier years before they morphed into a beautiful other group.
I think it's amazing that only 12 songs were ever put on a studio album. Well, I guess we have the singles and some of these other ones, but obviously they're known for having such a catalog of demos that we've heard by this time. And I think a lot of fans of the Iveys know these ones from various Apple compilations and EPs and things like that. But the album itself, the 12 songs that made it on the album, I don't know that they're even the strongest Ivey songs from a songwriting perspective and everything. They're produced very well, and I think, it's interesting in showing the versatility of the band that they could record this and 2 years later or whatever, a year later, have no dice.
The fact is, when they were playing in the clubs, that they were actually playing kind of heavier sound than the recording career would indicate, I think.
Yeah, well, they didn't play any of these songs.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. They did play heavy rock songs.
Yeah.
And BBC and stuff. They really didn't. They didn't play these songs. And I don't know why that is. If it was hard to reproduce, we could speculate, or if it really was an intentional choice that they wanted to project themselves in a different light. We cannot separate this from, same thing with Wish You Were Here and other stuff, from the commercial aspect of what the label did to this album, and that obviously affected their, insecurities about the writing. So anyway, that's Maybe Tomorrow, again, released July 69, and we're going back, and that wraps up, I guess, kind of the Iveys' core Badfinger era. So we'll see where we go from here, but let us know what you think, and thanks for watching.